be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Judas had left them, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and God will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little while longer. I give you a new commandment: love one another. As I have loved you, so you also should love one another. This is how I will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today, the book of Revelation in the second reading basically gives us a preview of how it all ends. Because we hear about the consummation of time and human history in this new heavenly Jerusalem. And those beautiful words that are spoken by Jesus when he says, "Behold, I make all things new." It's a short sentence, it's a few words, but they have great, profound meaning and implications for our lives. Because these words of Jesus remind us that only he can recreate us in his image and likeness, only he can save us. They remind us that human salvation does not happen out of human initiative. That no political system, no economic system, no ideology can bring forth paradise on earth. And it's the same for medicine and technology and advancements and progress. As good as some of these things are, and some things they do, they cannot bring forth earthly paradise. They are not God. And therefore they cannot rescue us from our sinfulness and our brokenness. They cannot bring about our salvation. Only God can. And Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John that he is the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father except through him. Meaning that Jesus Christ is not an option amongst many. That he is not one way to God, that he is not one of many truths, that he is not just one form of life. He is the truth, he is the way, he is life itself. And therefore, outside of him, we cannot find the truth. Outside of Christ, we cannot find our way to God. Outside of Jesus Christ and our relationship with him, we cannot find life everlasting. Only through Jesus do we have access to the Father, for only Jesus Christ reveals to us perfectly who God is. And as St. John Paul II used to say many times, only Jesus reveals man to man himself, meaning only Jesus reveals to us who we are and who we're meant to be. Only through Jesus can we encounter the authentic meaning and purpose and direction of our lives. Only in our relationship with Christ does our life make sense. And this is a radical thing, brothers and sisters. Because nowadays we live in a culture, in a society that has abandoned the truth. That has deaf ears to these words of Jesus when he says, "Behold, I make all things new." Because we want to recreate God in our image and likeness, because we want to save ourselves and transform ourselves without the help of God, and against his will even. It is alarming to see how as a society and a culture we have abandoned truth, the truth, How many in our society deny that there is such a thing as the natural law, meaning the Ten Commandments, to which all of us are bound to, or subject to, because they are inscribed in our hearts, for we are created in the image and likeness of God. And it's unfortunate to see how we've moved from believing in the truth, in the message of the gospel, to in little communities and groups forming our truth. And even further than that, we now believe in my truth and your truth. And so we want to be careful of this way of thinking, that you have your truth and I have my truth. Everybody has their own version of the truth, so that there is no truth. And isn't that the truth? That is a dangerous road to be in. Because when we believe that there is no objective truth, when we don't allow Christ to make us anew, when we abandon Christ who is the way, the truth, and the life, we end up defining freedom as, I have a right to my truth, and you are going to be subject to it. Even if this truth, quote unquote, is a delusion or a lie. And that is not freedom, that's bullying. And that is not okay. And we see this manifested in the culture of death that as Catholics we have to fight against. We see this manifested in the attempts to redefine marriage, in the attempts to even deform and misform marriage. We see this as well, even nowadays, in the denial of the gift of human nature as God has given it to us. Male and female, He created them. And behind these ways of thinking, people are hurting. These things do not lead us to salvation. They do not lead us to freedom and to an authentic joy, an authentic peace that Christ wants to offer us. They only lead to further division. They lead to sin. And therefore they lead us away from God. And so in the face of these challenges, in the face of this culture of death that we face, what do? We allow those words of Jesus to truly transform our lives. Behold, I make all things new. For Christ is constantly recreating on His image and likeness. He is constantly at work in our lives. First of all, through the life of the church, through the life of the sacraments, but He gives us His grace, His divine life. But also through our prayer, through our dying to ourselves, and through His living word. And so how do we face this anti-Christian culture? By we ourselves being authentic disciples of Jesus and entering into this living relationship with Him, a relationship that would transform every aspect of our lives, realizing that the gospel message is not one part of our lives, that it is our life. That the only way life makes sense is by thinking and acting and living and speaking like Jesus did. There is no way around it. We need to allow the Lord to make all things new in our lives. And once we allow the Lord into our hearts, into the home of our hearts, I assure you He will begin tearing down the old house, the old self. Because He wants us fully alive. St. Irenaeus once said that the glory of God is man fully alive. So Jesus desires us to have the fullness of divine life. But that implies that the old self needs to die. So if you ask me, Father, if I take to heart those words of Jesus, behold, I make all things new, what is that going to cost me? The answer is simple. Everything. It will cost you everything. No area in your life will remain unchanged, untouched by Jesus' love and mercy. And that will not always be comfortable and pleasant. It will cost you everything to allow him to recreate you in his image and likeness. But you will also gain everything. For you will gain life eternal, authentic joy and peace. And you will know who God is and who you are. And that is priceless. And that is worth everything. So as God speaks these words to us today, behold, I make all things new. The question is, will you allow yourself to be transformed by them? Will you allow yourself to be made anew